Hey, it's Jack. Sitting with me is my friend Joe Fye. He's got a podcast, Radio Free BTC. Joe, what is your podcast about?
Bitcoin.
That's cool. Do you cover other things like Minnesota politics?
Bitcoin.
What about national politics?
Bitcoin.
Do you ever get into sports? I don't talk about it a lot, but people love sports. Do you ever talk about sports?
Bitcoin.
Okay. There you have it. If you want a podcast about only Bitcoin, download Radio Free BTC wherever podcasts are sold.
Here with razor-sharp wit and blunt commentary on the two-edged blade that is policy and politics, it's the Jack Tomczak Show.
Good afternoon, Twin Cities. Up and let's go. Welcome to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm Jack Tomczak. On the show today, Republican Attorney General candidate Dennis Smith, one of at least two people on the Republican side running for Attorney General. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Jack, I'm well. Thanks for having me again. Great to see you.
How goes the race?
The race is incredible. Just incredible support. We've been traveling the state, 67 counties, and the enthusiasm for a candidate that can actually win and bust through this 56-year stronghold that the Democrats have. It's so encouraging and it's so much fun. We're having actual legitimate fun out there on the campaign trail.
I took a page out of your campaign strategy book, and I was in Lowry, Minnesota, earlier this week at a bar called The Hatchery, and I took a picture of The Hatchery, and I said, seeing the state for my exploratory listening tour for state auditor, which I'm not running for. But I might pretend I'm going to run for it for a while. So I also, Dennis, am seeing the state and meeting her people.
Yeah, no,
and they're excited for you.
Yes, that is great to hear, and we're seeing that everywhere we go. And we are traveling the state. We're seeing parts of the state that statewide Republican candidates have never been to. We went to one area up on the North Shore, and we wanted to go up there. If I can tell a fun little campaign story.
We had a whole hour to fill, man. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I'll give you the long version. So
gather around, children.
And so we called them up and said, we want to come visit. You're having a group. And they said, well, are you sure? And we're like, well, yes, we want to come visit. This is up on the North Shore in Beaver Bay. And they said, well, you really want to come? And we kept going back and forth. And finally we said, no, we want to come. You're gathering. We want to come talk to you. We want to listen to you. Every voice matters in this race. In our state, every voice matters. And because every voice we know now is not being listened to. It's only some voices.
North Shore, Beaver Bay,
yes.
8th Congressional District.
Right.
An area that Republicans have. We're doing better in the 8th. We have the congressional seat, but typically we've left the 8th alone, and particularly the closer you get up the, what do they call that? The arrowhead, the triangle that goes up on the lake.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that our campaign, the Dennis Smith for Attorney General campaign, is appealing to all sorts of voters that haven't been engaged before in the process, and independents and Democrats. And this story doesn't represent that, but I have another story later on if I can tell that one about that idea.
Whole hour.
Yes, yeah. I love it. So
we can talk BMX racing.
Oh, we're going to talk BMX racing.
Bringing milk to school.
National championships.
I've heard that.
You remember that? Yes.
It's all the kids on the street are talking about.
Not just the kids, the adults as well.
Yes.
I mean, it's everybody.
Quite the topic.
Big time. So she said, the person that's running the meeting, she said, I'm so honored you want to come talk to us. I want to bake you a pie for coming. What kind of pie do you want? So I discussed it with Caroline. We had a long discussion trying to figure out was it going to be my favorite pie or her favorite pie.
Okay.
I won that discussion, and I requested a triple berry pie, and she made it. So we went up there on that Saturday, and we had a great discussion with them. Engaged, like 30 people, a great group of folks, and she gave me the pie afterwards. She was so honored that we went up there, and I was honored that they would have me up there. That they are accepting of people coming to visit them, because no one has ever come up to visit them before.
What were the 3 berries? Because that's important in a triple berry pie. Like, what the 3 berries are, that's crucial.
Exactly. Yeah. Raspberry, blueberry, blackberry.
Well, that works.
Yeah, because strawberry should be its own kind of pie.
Absolutely.
They don't get blended into the berry pie.
No, you can't share. Strawberry is too big of a thing to share the stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's with kiwi, but that's only for beverages.
Exactly, right. And you kind of cheat out on the berry pie if you throw in the strawberry.
Absolutely.
If you're going to have 4 berry, that's a whole different thing.
We're not prepared to discuss 4 berry today, Dennis.
Not today. Maybe next time.
So what was the group? Was it a Republican group, a conservative group?
A conservative
Or was
group.
it a radical lefty group who really has never talked to a Republican candidate before?
We've talked to some of those, which I want to talk about later. But it was a very conservative group, not necessarily associated with the basic political operating unit of the Republican Party. This is a group of conservative patriots that are very unhappy about the direction of our state with the COVID mandates, mask compliance, the race relations, how the police are not being respected, and how society has shifted on the police. So since I've been up there, 4 other statewide candidates have gone. So we are redefining how you campaign, and I find it interesting that there's someone that I'm competing with for the to be the Republican nominee that they never went up there in 2018 ever,
Okay.
and so right after I was up there, they called up. Doug Wardler called and said, I want to come up. And they're like, well, where were you 4 years ago? Why does it take your opponent to come here? We're finding that happening all over the state. People are like, thanks for coming up to our area because we advertised you were coming and your opponent called and said they want to come too. So we're working hard out there. We're earning the respect. We're earning the vote of every single Minnesotan.
Okay, you mentioned police not being respected. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the Hennepin County Sheriff Hutchinson is recently got into a situation where he does not deserve respect. Got a Dewey, messed up his squad car, drinking and driving while on duty, driving his sheriff's car with all the guns that come with being the sheriff and in a sheriff's car and all kinds of other fun stuff. In that car. Is there anything, like clearly the Hennepin County Sheriff it should not be the Hennepin County Sheriff. Maybe I shouldn't say that. You're running to be the top law enforcement officer in the state. What do you do for the situation where a sheriff is clearly unfit for the job? Can you do anything?
I think I know Sheriff Hutch, and I think he's a great person, and I think he's been a good sheriff. He clearly had a lapse of judgment that evening. And I think he's made amends, and he's continuing to make amends with dealing with that issue, both for himself and caring for himself. I think he's been very open about that. And that's admirable when someone talks about how they're not perfect and they're trying to make themselves better and trying to be healthier. In regard to his actual position, he was voted into that position. And I think it's fine for him to continue to be the sheriff and run for re-election if he wants. The ballot box is where these things should be decided. And if the voters are not going to like his direction as to what he's done, then he should be voted out. And he stated...
I've heard his direction is swervy.
What do you...
That was a drunk driving joke.
Okay, all right. I see what you're saying.
I can make them.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I can do that.
Okay, yeah. So in regard to the joke itself, that was... Yeah, I didn't know exactly what you meant, so...
Very few people do.
Sorry, I didn't...
So you're fine with him being in the capacity after his incident. He's apologized, and that's good enough for you, and he should face the voters?
I mean, there's other things, too. He needs to be held. So one thing we're having in this state is a lack of accountability. And when accountability is measured, it's not being measured equally.
Yep.
Sometimes depends on what party you're from. Sometimes it depends on your economic situation. Sometimes it depends on the makeup or the color of your skin. There's not equal accountability. When I'm Attorney General, there's going to be equal accountability. The law is the law, and we're going to have equal application of that. So he needs to be held, the sheriff needs to be held to the same standard that anyone else is or does when they commit a similar offense.
What kind of authority does the Attorney General have in, let's say, sentencing? Because sometimes when things are uneven, unfair, unequal, when people are treated differently depending on who they know, their political affiliation, the color of their skin, whatever, it's done at sentencing. Does the Attorney General have a say in that? I'm not a lawyer.
And that's okay. We have too many attorneys, so that's good that you're not an attorney there. But in regard to the sentencing itself, since that was my attorney joke that you didn't laugh at either, like I didn't laugh at.
I can tell it was a joke, though.
Okay.
When it's funny, I'll laugh.
Okay, all right, that's fair. And the same applies me to you as well.
All my jokes are funny.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll discuss that later. That's debatable. It depends on the type of case. If the case is in the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General can give a recommendation and can advocate for that. If the case is outside of the Attorney General's office, there's general advocacy that can be done, but you're not directly involved. So the trying to impact what's going to happen is you're much more limited on. But an additional element is the sentencing guidelines that the state has. And the Attorney General has a role in determining and having a voice in what those should be. And there was some recent news about this. And people should take a long look at this because the sentencing guidelines that came out a couple of weeks ago, it's not right for Minnesota. It's not what we want. And that result will show in the ballot box in November of 2020.
So what are the sentencing, like who determines sentencing guidelines and what are the recent ones that you are referring to?
Yeah, so it's the legislature. Okay. The legislature, I mean, we kind of forgot that during COVID, that executive orders.
We still have that legislature thing?
That
was kind of passe.
Yeah, exactly. Some people in our state government would like that to happen. But we still have a legislature. They make the laws. If you want to change the law, go get in the House of Representatives. I was there. It's a fine institution. It's awesome. Go get in the Senate. They're pretty good too. And see, now that was a joke and you laughed. Good. Yeah, thank you. And then you can change the sentencing guidelines. You can advocate for them on the outside, and depending on your role in government, or as every citizen can advocate for that. But in general, the governor, along with the Democrats, they want less consequences when you break the law. Across the board. That's what those sentencing guidelines said. That's unacceptable. We need more consequences. We need the actual laws that are being held right now followed. We can't have people make up laws like this Kim Potter trial. I hope this comes up later because you can't just enhance the penalty, enhance the charge for political reasons. This is a non-political position, and Keith Ellison is making it political, and that is wrong. That's part of the anger that's in Minnesota right now. So
we're going to touch on the Kim Potter situation after the break. But with sentencing guidelines, so new sentencing guidelines came out. They're determined by the legislature. So the Republicans, at least the Senate, Republican-led Senate would have had a voice in that. But they're not. You don't think they're strict enough?
Well, no, I don't. I think that it depends on the type of penalty. What we're seeing is that for crimes that are small, we're seeing that in general, that people are being, they're too severe of a penalty. But for the more serious crimes, people are being let off without any consequences. If you look at the, we'll
come back to that. I got to take a break anyway. I got to pay some radio bills. You're listening to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm interviewing Minnesota Republican Party Attorney General candidate Dennis Smith. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm Jack Tomczak. I'm talking with one of the Republican candidates, Minnesota Republican Party candidates for Attorney General, Dennis Smith. We left off talking about sentencing guidelines that have been recently determined by the legislature that you do not think are tough enough. Correct?
Right. Exactly.
And determined by the legislature, signed off by the governor. How does sentencing guidelines work? Because they're not in session right now. So how did this just happen?
Yeah, so they're talking about modifications for the guidelines.
Modification for the guidelines. Okay.
And what we're finding is that the Democrats in this state, they're not in line with what the average voter, what the average Minnesotan wants. They want people to be held accountable. In
the Democrats do, or the average person does?
The average person wants people to be held accountable. And I don't think the Democrats do. I know Attorney General Keith Ellison doesn't want to. He's the most anti-police, pro-crime Attorney General, I think, in the history of our country. And we're seeing the effect of it. Every day, when you open up the newspaper, when I still get the actual newspaper, when I open up the newspaper, I read, if I haven't read it on Twitter from your site or someone else's earlier in the evening or in the morning, we see how many carjackings are there. Carjackings happen, they're so commonplace. The murders, we have little kids being murdered in their own bed as they lay asleep at 3 a.m. in North Minneapolis. This is an outrage. This is what the entire United States sees of our whole state. It's what the entire world sees of our whole state.
Now, what Minnesotans have come to believe about the Attorney General's office is that it's an office made to go after companies, like under Mike Hatch and Lori Swanson. That was the goal, and it was less about fighting crime. So I don't know what the Attorney General's role is in fighting crime. What does the Attorney General do to prevent carjackings? What does the Attorney General do to clean up North Minneapolis? Because that place is a mess, and that is where little kids are being murdered in their beds or in the backseat of their mom's car.
Right.
Like, what is the Attorney General's role? If we had an Attorney General who was interested in fighting crime, does that office have the power to do that?
Yes.
Okay. How?
Not directly, but indirectly. When I'm Attorney General, I'm going to fight crime. We're going to support the police. We're going to build a bridge to the police, like I built bridges when I was in the legislature on complex legislation, and try to solve this problem and let police know that when you make a mistake, because mistakes happen, you will get a fair shake. We're not going to use politics to prosecute you. With the Kim Potter trial, it's an outrage that this, in quick fashion, without a full study of the facts, Attorney General Ellison increased the charge from man 2 to man 1. That is an outrage that happened. And these police officers need to know that they're going to be supported. They're going to be held accountable. Everybody wants their officials, their people in the community to be held accountable. They want to be held accountable as well. But it needs to be fair, and you need to be reasonable, and you need to be able to take a rational approach and look at all the facts, then make a decision about what needs to happen.
So what do you think the charge on Kim Potter should have been? Man 2?
I think man 2 was reasonable, yes. And I think that a good case could be made that the punishment would have been she's no longer an officer, and she had probation with some community service. Because accidents happen, Jack. We know that. In life, accidents happen. There isn't always a crime with every accident.
Somebody is dead.
Yes.
You know, some accidents are much bigger than other accidents.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is obviously extremely unfortunate that family, that person is no longer alive, and that his family has been altered in that way.
I talked with a Washington County attorney, Pete Orput, who was in charge of the case for a while, and then Nakima protested his neighborhood, and Pete tapped out, and then it was then Keith Ellison was in charge of the prosecution. As Attorney General in a situation like the Kim Potter case, is that, and I'm sure Orput told me this, but I've forgotten. Is that up to the Attorney General right away to decide who prosecutes that? Or does that start at the county level?
No, it starts at the county level. And this is something that the Dennis Smith, when I'm Attorney General, that I'm going to be advocating. I'm going to be pushing these Attorney Generals to do these county attorneys to do their job. They cannot be handing off these cases just because it is too difficult or it's too hot in the proverbial kitchen. They need to represent their district. They're duly elected. If they don't want to do that, they should resign and go find some other employment. But they need to prosecute these cases. The Attorney General's office needs to support them. Often there's requests for help of guidelines, requests that come in on resources, different types of specialty. On average, before Keith Ellison became the Attorney General, on average, 12 cases a year were voluntarily given from the county attorney to the Attorney General's office. Okay. 12. Okay.
Before Keith, it was 12.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And what we're finding is that Keith is handpicking cases that he wants because it's going to get him headlines. It's going to get him on national TV because there's a political agenda involved. And that is wrong, Jack. We cannot allow that to happen. Our judicial system should not have politics in it in that way. And one of my opponents wants to take these cases from the Attorney Generals as well. Doug Wardlow wants to take cases away from the county attorneys, wants to expand government, which defies logic. They're elected in their area. Our justice is best served at the local level. That's why we revere our mayors and our city councils so much. our government needs to be accountable at the lowest level possible. And these county attorneys, they want to do their job. You know, it's interesting about specifically with the Kim Potter trial. Mm-hmm. Remember, Mike Freeman said, there's a conflict of interest. I can't have this case in my office. There's a conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. I'm conflicted out. Well, why the heck were county attorney prosecutors that work for Mike Freeman working on this case then? If he's conflicted out, that means his whole office is conflicted out.
So once Keith Ellison had the case, there were Hennepin County attorneys working for Keith Ellison on this case?
Yes.
Even though Mike Freeman himself said he was conflicted out?
Exactly.
One would think his entire staff would be conflicted out, but apparently...
That's reasonable.
Okay.
Yes.
So you said 12, pre-Keith Ellison, 12 cases were kicked up to the Attorney General's office. What are the numbers for during Keith Ellison's reign as Attorney General?
I'm not sure of the number for during while he's Attorney General, but if it's a case that's going to get him headlines, those are the ones he wants.
Sounds like a politician to me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's wrong. Lady Justice is blind. We need to have an Attorney General who's interested in doing the right thing, regardless of the consequences. Sometimes that might mean making an uncomfortable charge against maybe one of your friends that owns a business or one of the landmark companies in our state, or bringing a case forward against the police department. If you're fair, if you're giving everyone an even shake at the law, if you're applying reason and you're acting accordingly in the constructs of the law, everybody in Minnesota can live with that, including every corporation and every police officer. When you're doing things because politics gets involved, that's when we go astray, and we've gone astray. That will stop when I'm Attorney General.
So, in a case with Sheriff Hutchinson, I don't even know who prosecuted that because that didn't happen here. Are there cases, because that sheriff's office, like, that's political, and a lot of these people know each other, and county attorneys work with sheriffs all the time, and county attorneys work with law enforcement all the time. Like, that's the rationale for moving the prosecution to a different prosecutor, because if the prosecutor in Hennepin County works with law enforcement in Hennepin County, so if a member of law enforcement is the subject of the prosecution, that's the rationale for moving it somewhere else, because you don't want to have the people who have worked with this officer before prosecuting them, because that potentially is not fair.
That's one of them, yes.
So if you're Attorney General, what standard would you apply to want to move cases from a county attorney to your office? How does that work? Or how would that work under
I would never request that.
Okay.
The county attorney gets to raise their hand and say, I need some help. I'm conflicted out on this case and I can't find a neighboring county attorney to handle it. Okay. Or the specialty is so unique that it's best served in the Attorney General's office. But to say I'm taking cases away from you, like Doug Wardlow wants, is not how our judicial system was built and shouldn't happen. And for one county attorney, Mike Freeman, to kick it over to Washington County, and then when they said they don't want it, for them to basically throw it in the lap of Keith Ellison, who was trying to catch it, that's not right either. So in the case with Hutch, it's going to be prosecuted by, or it should be prosecuted by, the county attorney in the county where this incident happened.
Okay.
And they can sort that out. They are going to make the charges against the sheriff, and there should not be a conflict. There appears not to be one on the surface, okay. And that process should unfold. How it unfolds for if you or I were up in that county and had a similar charge against us. Equal application of the law. It's not happening now. It will when I'm Attorney General.
What kind of lawyer are you?
I deal mostly with estates and business transactional law.
Does an estate and business transactional law lawyer, how does that translate into prosecuting crime-fighting lawyer? Again, I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
And I know that you all take the same classes to some degree, but the specific areas of practice are different.
Right, just like being a doctor. Everyone goes through med school, and you have a license to practice any type of law or medical field that you want. There are specialties, and people find an area that they like working in. I like working in the estate area because you're dealing with multiple parties. I love to work with people and to solve problems. You're dealing often with multiple parties solving complex issues. And my typical client is older, and that's why I think I'm well suited to be the Attorney General. One of the many reasons that we can go into later.
Of course, many reasons.
Exactly. Yes, three manys, is because my average client is older, and so we're dealing with complex issues and we're solving them. And the ability to take a problem and to figure out a path and build a bridge to that solution. I did that in the legislature time and time again, and I will do that as Attorney General to help turn this state around.
All right, let's take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll address some recent controversy involving you and the practice of law. This is the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with Minnesota, one of the Republican Party candidates for Attorney General, Dennis Smith. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I'm talking with one of the Republicans running for Attorney General here in our fine state of Minnesota, Republican candidate Dennis Smith. We've been all over the place on what you're doing as a campaigner and what you will do as Attorney General. Let's talk controversy.
Yes.
I don't know how up to date I am on this topic.
Well,
I don't pay attention to the news, but I've got a November story from NPR saying Republican Attorney General candidate faces suspended law license by fellow Wisconsinite and Packer fan Brian Baxt. So update me on that. Do you have a license to practice law, Dennis?
I do have a license to practice law.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the story with that. I've been practicing law for over 22 years. Thousands of clients, literally thousands of clients. I had a client for 14 years, a sweet, dear, older woman. She finally passed. The executor of her estate was a person from Vermont, lives in the middle of Vermont.
Okay.
Never met her. So during the height of COVID, we were working through the estate of her sister, of her sister's estate, and she was unhappy with the level of client service I provided.
Okay.
So she filed a complaint with the Board of Professional Responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I resolved that issue very quickly. And the client said, I want to, and I said, where do you want your file to go? Because someone else was going to complete it. And she said, well, I want you to continue to represent me. And I said, hold on. You filed a complaint with the board. And she goes, yeah. She goes, I felt like what you did there was wrong, but you fixed it. I want you to continue to represent me. And I said, well, I don't know how this goes. I said, but I'm going to check with the board because this seems unusual. Mm-hmm. And the board said, yeah, that's very unusual. But if you want to and she wants to, you guys can continue with your engagement. So we continued. Then things became political, and I'm going to refrain from talking about that more until you have me back the next time after the court approves the stipulation that I signed,
okay.
Because I'm limited as to what I can say before the signing. But I refer you to two recent articles by the Star Tribune on October 24th and December 11th about the Lawyers Responsibility Board, October 24th, December 11th. It talks about this organization, and I suggest everyone who's interested in this story should read those two articles, and they're going to be able to connect the dots pretty easily. So back to my specific situation. The client and I made amends with her. I reduced her bill by 75%. She wrote me a thank you note when she received the final invoice. So we parted ways. I made amends with her, and the board went on for 18 months. And it was it was a challenging time, you could say, and I wanted to get this behind me. So I agreed to a 30-day suspension of my license, and after that, we're gonna move forward and everything will be fine. And so I agreed to that because 18 months is long enough. I was restricted to talking to anyone about it, even my children, mm-hmm. my adult children. I did not talk to about this until a couple of weeks before it came out. And when it came out, this is important because I really feel passionate about this. Leaders must have the resolve to take ownership when they make mistakes. They don't get to just bask in the sunshine in their victories. So when this came out, I went to the press, gave an interview even though he's a Packer fan, gave an interview with Brian, issued a statement on my 9,500 email list, and I held a town hall. I held a town hall for almost 10,000 people. And we talked about this issue. And the more I talk about it, the more people identify with the licensing boards in this state of Minnesota and how it's nearly criminal what they do to almost every profession that needs a license to practice whatever they're doing. Whether it's eyelashes, or you're an accountant, or you're a pipe fitter, or you're an attorney, the outpouring of support I've received from this, it's been truly really moving, Jack, that other attorneys who are involved in politics said, this happened to me. I learned from it. We always can do better. We're not perfect. And I learned from this as well. And I'm a better person for this. I'm a better communicator, and I'll be a better attorney general because of this. It's given me empathy for other attorneys about this profession that I'm in.
So the article that NPR has says Dennis Smith has agreed to the recommended license suspension. That's 30 days.
That is 30 days.
Payment of $900. That's doable.
Yep.
And probation for 2 years. And that means you can't, quote unquote, screw up for 2 years.
No, it doesn't mean that.
Okay.
I mean, everyone's human, so there very well could be scripts. The supervisory period is meant to make sure that the issue that you had the complaint filed over, that you're continuing to make amends and you're not going to fall in that same pattern or uncover the same issue. Like, my issue wasn't financial related, but if it was financial related, you send your QuickBooks over every month or every other month, and they review your QuickBooks to make sure that your trust accounting is up to date.
Okay.
No, that wasn't my issue. Mine was about communication. So they would want to know, up until I win the election, they would want to know that my communication is staying current with my clients. It's simply a spreadsheet that is given to a supervising attorney, and then after I'm attorney general, it won't be relevant.
And the article continues, the disciplinary arraignment was signed by Smith last week. It still awaits final sign-up by the state Supreme Court. Is that the final thing? Like, after that, you could talk more?
Exactly. Okay. Yes. Yep. And that has not happened yet.
That's going to be an issue in the campaign. And that's just how politics is and how life is. Like, it doesn't matter how good or right you are, if it can be framed in a way that makes you look like the bad guy, that becomes the reality in politics, and that sucks, but it's true. And it's so odd that the woman who filed the complaint still wanted you to be her lawyer. Does she understand the problems?
Interesting, isn't it, that she wanted that, and that she wrote me a thank you note. And if you read the NPR article,
you're going to need to have her on the campaign trail at every stop, so she can explain things.
And she's a fan of Bernie Sanders, but she likes me as a person. Okay. And in the NPR article, she said on the record that I did not act unethically. She also, there's a third party involved that's not related to the attorney-client relationship. Okay. And this person clearly stated in the article that it's about politics. So, yes, I mean, it's going to be an issue in the campaign trail. There are a lot of issues that are going to be involved in this case. We need to keep in mind that Attorney General Ellison did not have a law license up until about a week before the voting started in 2018. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He didn't have a law license. In Minnesota, you don't need to have a law license, but that's not the point. Is that this campaign is not going to be about these types of things or the ethics investigation ongoing on Keith Ellison in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's not going to be about that. It's not going to be about the allegations in his prior life about things that have happened. It's going to be about how people in our state don't feel safe to go to the to go to the damn grocery store, to go to the grocery store, liquor store, like those little strip malls. When you're unloading your car in your own neighborhood, you're getting hit over the head by a wrench, and someone is stealing your car. There's carjackings. You can't keep up with them. You know what? We're going to surpass the Murderapolis rate. Remember in 1995, Time Magazine dubbed our city Murderapolis? Yep. Yeah. We're 3 homicides away from that happening. And I think that's going to happen. It's going to be a
by the end of the year?
By the end of the year. That is outrageous. And the St. Paul set an all-time record of the number of homicides.
Now, by the time this is up at the radio station on today, Saturday, it'll be the end of it'll be the first on Saturday, right? Is today the first? You got to think in future radio time. It's very confusing. But people will know by the time this is up at the Patriot,
Yeah.
if they've hit that number.
And the point isn't whether we set an all-time record or not. The point is
I'm
that
not competing here,
okay,
Dennis. I'm just saying.
Okay, all right.
We'll know by then.
Yeah,
I hope we lose this one.
We will, and I hope we do too. But we're having, as we mentioned earlier, little kids, 10-year-olds being gunned down in their own damn bed at 3 a.m. We're having people driving on the road having random shootings. These people are not being held accountable. Instead of an attorney general trying to solve the crime problem, he's out trying to destroy the Minneapolis Police Department, openly advocating for that police department to no longer exist. It's not in step with Minnesota. It is an outrage, and the voters will speak about that issue on Election Day.
So when is you mentioned your campaign stop on the North Shore where you got triple berry pie.
Yes.
And how unique that was, and your opponents are following you up there. When is the last time you campaigned in Minneapolis and North Minneapolis where things are bad, where we've never gone, where we've rarely gone as Republicans? Yep.
So that's one thing different with this campaign is we're going everywhere in the state. We're going to Minneapolis. We're going to St. Paul. We're going to all these neighborhoods. I think the last time was maybe 2 weeks ago. I need to check the calendar to get the specific date. And it's incredible when you sit down and you talk to people that aren't used to being listened to and what they say. They want the same things we want. Every Minnesotan wants the same things. They want to be safe on their streets. They want to have a job to go to. They want to go home at the end of the day to their loved ones and enjoy life. And that is not what's being met by the current Attorney General. That will happen when I am.
I'm talking with one of the Republican candidates for Attorney General running against, right now, Keith Ellison. That is Dennis Smith. You're listening to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280, The Patriot. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. I am interviewing Minnesota Republican Attorney General candidate, one of, I said 2 earlier, but it is one of 3. 4, but it is one of, holy cow. And I'm announcing today, so 1 of 5. But this candidate is Dennis Smith. And Dennis Smith, I've reached out to other candidates, and you're the one who says yes the most. So thank you.
Well, thanks for asking.
You know how to win.
Exactly.
You got to get the Tomczak bump.
Exactly. And that's the kind of campaign that we're running, that we're going everywhere. We're not afraid to go into Minneapolis and St. Paul. And we're not afraid to go to every part of the state and listen to people. You know, we talked earlier about going up to the North Shore, a fun event I wanted.
The Jack Tomczak Show, the North Shore of AM radio.
Yeah.
Beautiful and sparse.
Yeah, we had an event in a Democrat neighborhood in Minneapolis.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, and only Democrats came. I was the only person speaking. There was no confusion about who was going to be there. Mm-hmm. Republican Attorney General candidate Dennis Smith. Come hear him talk. People came. Half the people there, said, Dennis, I've never voted for a Republican. And the bubble pops up in my head. I'm thinking in a cycle, in 2 cycles, or maybe since Pawlenty.
Ever.
And they came to this event to listen to Dennis Smith, the Republican Attorney General. 2/3 of them wrote checks that day. Okay. It wasn't about a fundraiser. It was about talking to people that haven't voted Republican. And I think we're going to get all their votes at the end of the day, 100% of that room. This campaign is reaching out to groups. We have this cross appeal. In 2016, to demonstrate this, in 2016 when I was in the Minnesota House of Representatives, candidate Donald Trump ran against candidate Hillary Clinton for president. Okay. Hillary Clinton beat Trump by 5 points in my district. Okay. And I beat Hillary Clinton. I thumped her by 10 points. Okay. So 9 points. So what that means is that people voted for me that don't agree with me on every issue. That is rare in Minnesota politics. So you have someone saying, I don't agree with you on every issue, but I trust you to go to the Capitol and represent me and do the right thing. That's what we need in Republican politics. That's what's been missing for so long as to why we can't win the suburbs, why we can't convert and capture the middle and the lean Democrats. We did that day. We've done this at other events as well. People are coming to this campaign because they do not like the direction of the state, and they want someone who's reasonable, someone that can communicate, someone that can listen. And that's why people are coming to the Dennis Smith for Attorney General campaign.
All right, who was the last Republican Attorney General?
Douglas Head.
Douglas Head.
1966.
I keep forgetting his name. Doug Head. All right, so we haven't had a Republican since when was it?
1966.
I have a 1966 story too, but I'll tell that later. And we've not won statewide since Tim Pawlenty in 2006.
Yeah, 25 elections in a row statewide we've lost.
Yeah. And you can go to the North Shore pie parties and Minneapolis, and that will help to some degree your efforts on Election Day. But if the Republican gubernatorial candidate doesn't do that, and the Republican Attorney General or Secretary of State candidate doesn't do that, and the auditor doesn't do that, it'll have limited effect.
I disagree.
But if everybody goes there, it'll help you more, and it'll help them more, and it'll help the state more. Like, we need an all-out offensive on urban Minneapolis and St. Paul to win statewide. Because we've squeezed all the votes we can out of greatest Minnesota. We need to get votes we've never had before.
But the suburbs we can do better in as well.
How? I agree.
Yep.
I agree. I don't know the answer to that. I live in the 3rd. We have to do better.
Yep.
Because we typically have.
Right.
Back when I worked for Rod Graham's in 2000, the 3rd was a slam dunk.
Yeah.
And now it's not.
Yeah. In 2014, we lost all 14 suburban legislative seats.
What year?
In 2018. 2018, we went 0 for 14 in suburban legislative seats.
Wow.
So those voters haven't come back yet. And they're willing to come back to a reasonable candidate. That event I talked to you about where all the Democrats were at, I said, well, why didn't you vote for the Republican in 2018? You knew who Keith Ellison was. You knew he was a person that didn't identify with your values. It was to say he's far left is an understatement. It's an insult to the far left word. And they said, you guys the Republicans put up a candidate as far to the right as Keith Ellison is to the left. And that doesn't represent Minnesota. That's why Doug Wardlow can't win this race. He's hit his high water mark. He's never been over 50%. In the primary in 2018, he was at 46%.
Okay.
In the general, he was at 45%. If he's the candidate in 2022, we're going to get 4 more years of Keith Ellison because it's going to happen just like it happened to Jeff Johnson. Look at Jeff Johnson's numbers from 2014 to 2018. He didn't increase his support. It dropped significantly. The same thing will happen again. Second-time statewide candidates don't do well. It's not a Minnesota phenomenon. It's a national phenomenon.
So is the answer to have a more moderate candidate, or is the answer to take a conservative candidate and message conservatism better?
It's a blend of the two. I'm a principled conservative. I have a 100% voting record with MCCL, fighting for those that can't speak for themselves. 100% voting record with the Minnesota Gokra defending our Second Amendment. But if you look at my legislative record, I have significant bills that transcended party lines. I got Democrats on board to a lot of my bills. And
like what? What are your transcending party line bills?
Yep. Well, number one we can take is the Crumb rubber bill. So in the Crumb rubber, we had this issue where those little black pebbles that are in the sports field.
Yep.
Okay, it was information came to me that they were giving our kids cancer.
Okay.
Yep. So so I brought a bill forward to get additional money to research this further, to look into this issue. If we're producing a product, if we're endorsing, if our school districts and our communities are buying a product that's giving our kids cancer, okay, that needs to stop.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, not everyone saw it that way. And a lot of Republicans weren't with me on that issue.
And this was just to study it?
This was to study it further, yes. But there was concern about if you studied further that, that it could lead to outlawing that product.
Well, that's how rail transit works in the state. You get $1 for the study.
Right.
And then you just wait and you train in 20 years.
Exactly.
That
Before you know
billions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Forever in perpetuity. Yes. Yeah. And so I was able to work with Democrats to get them on board with this issue and some Republicans and move that issue forward. We brought that issue further than it's ever been brought forth before in the legislature. Additionally, the ADA laws. So we got through and we broke the trial attorneys on the ADA law modifications. Took
Americans
2 years.
with Disabilities Act.
Exactly. There was some rogue attorneys that were filing lawsuits because your sign was too low or too high, like you have out on your parking lot. and they were extorting businesses. So I worked with Democrats and Republicans and got the governor to sign it. Took 2 years. That's the type of working together where you need an attorney general who can work with people and get things done. I am that candidate.
All right. What is your website?
My website, DennisSmith.org.
DennisSmith.org, which is replete with a lot of BMX pictures.
Yes.
As an adult.
National championships. Yep.
When parade season starts, Dennis, are you going to ride a BMX bike?
Well, yeah, and also have the milk truck there too.
Does he do tricks? Do you do tricks?
Or
or just speed?
Well, it's mostly speed, but there's some tricks. I mean, every BMXer can do some tricks. But also some good milk truck stories, and the milk trucks might be in the parade as well.
All right, 10 seconds. Your appeal to my listeners.
I want to thank Minnesota for the reception they've given this campaign as we traveled around to 67 counties in this year. We look forward to continued speaking to the citizens of Minnesota. DennisSmith.org. Join our campaign. It's a lot of fun.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.